For we were saved in this hope, but hope that is seen is not hope. For why does one still hope for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we eagerly wait for it with perseverance. What are you waiting for, and what are you persevering to attain? Hi, I'm Alex. This is my wife, Casey. We've been married for 8 years. We have 2 beautiful girls, Michaela and Grace.
So even though we've been married for 8 years, we actually met in 2000, 16 years ago, in Virginia, where we went to school at UVA. And we were introduced to one another through mutual friends. And it was kind of from there we started seeing each other more and more, and we dated all throughout college until Alex moved to Chicago for his job when he graduated earlier than I did. And we tried to make the long distance thing work for a while, but Alex decided that wasn't working for him. So he broke up with me.
I was a very different person at the time, and didn't think that I could be a committed man at the time. Probably couldn't have. So
you're probably right. So I accepted that, but we still stayed in contact. We had a really long and close connection, and at the end of my senior year, I accepted a position with Teach for America to join their corps, and I was assigned to be placed in Atlanta. So that was kind of the coffin, or the nail in the coffin, as they say, in terms of what we thought for our relationship. I was going to move to Atlanta, he was in Chicago. So, you know, we kind of accepted that. And one day I got an email from Teach for America that they were not going to be able to find jobs for all of us, and they asked if anyone would consider going to a different region. And Chicago was one of the cities on the list. So I just called Alex and I said, hey, I got this email. And after talking for a little bit, we decided, why not? The only thing stopping us from being together was distance. So I went ahead and emailed Teach for America, and I was the last corps member placed in Chicago. So even though we thought we were going to be taken to very different places, something unexpected happened, and I came to Chicago and we got back together. Yeah.
Funny thing about that story is when I broke up with her because of the distance, I said, if by some chance we end up coming back together, I will take it as a sign from God. Probably not even believing that when I said it, but God has a sense of humor.
And I definitely didn't believe that, because in college and even when I moved to Chicago, I did not believe in God. I was an atheist for as long as I can remember, even though I studied religious studies in college. But, you know, for whatever reason, here we are.
There came a point in our relationship when now we're both living in Chicago. Things are going well. Both of us are successful in our respective professions, living downtown. You know, things are pretty good. And I started to feel this pull, even though I was still kind of living in the world. I did know God at an early age, even though I had drifted away through the years, especially in college. But I started to feel a pull, like God was telling me to do something or telling me to come back to Him. And it was a struggle in my mind, because I knew she was an atheist. I knew she was a proud atheist, so to speak. Comes from a line of atheists who are not the type that are just too lazy to investigate, but they have PhDs in their belief system. And I knew, the very little I did know, was that the two can't be unequally yoked, and that a marriage, especially bringing kids into the picture, wouldn't work with us having such different worldviews. Me going to church and telling them one thing, her not, and telling them something different. So I started to talk with my pastor, talk with my best friend at the time, and I would wear their ears out, just trying to figure out, how do I reconcile this situation? How do I can I make this right? Can I make this work with her? And it came to a point in talking with my pastor that I had to make a decision. And it led me to have one of the most difficult conversations I've ever had with another human being. We were sitting there in the living room at the time, and I said to her, I love you, but I love God more, essentially. Now, to an atheist, that makes no sense because there was nothing wrong with the relationship. But I knew I had to be obedient, and that was my only focus at the time.
So when Alex did work up the courage to end the relationship, while I wasn't surprised because I had seen him going to church more often and talking about things in a different way, behaving differently, there was a clear change in him, a clear pull, and I could see that he was conflicted. I was devastated. I didn't know, where to pick up my life kind of without him. So I started thinking about, starting over and just accepting it. But it did kind of feel like a huge loss. And that I wouldn't get to see something I put years and years and really changed my life for come to fruition. So it was incredibly devastating.
Faith is only a theory until tested, which means you may not even know if you have faith until faith is all you have left. So about a month later, a month and a half, I was at church, and it's one of those services where you feel like you're the only person in the room, and the pastor or speaker is talking directly to you. And I can even remember where I was sitting, about 5-7 rows from the back, about 5 to 7 seats in from the aisle. And he was preaching about him trying to find his wife. And there was, I think, about 5 different girls, not all at the same time, that he had been with or been dating and brought and basically prayed about and asked God, is this the one? And each time God said no, until he met his one and only wife, who he's still with to this day. And it occurred to me that I tried to debate this thing with her, and I always lost. For those that know me will find this funny, because the reason I lost is I didn't know enough word. Now kids call me Bible man because they think I know all the scripture, which I don't. But that was the reason I could never convince her, so to speak. I brought her to another pastor one time from a different church I was at. He couldn't do it. So I had made some efforts, but the one thing I had never really done is give God a chance. And it's probably the first thing I should have done. So when the pastor was talking at the end of the service, I said to myself, okay, it's pretty much over anyway. Might as well give God a chance. As is the way we tend to do things in our lives, which is backwards. So I went to her. I said, hey, kind of flippantly, if you want to come to church with me next Sunday, that would be cool. To my surprise, she said yes. But even then, I didn't really think much of it. I figured, okay, she'll come, she'll see these crazy Christians, and that'll be that, clean break. So the next week we're in church, and as we sit down, pretty much in the same spot I had been sitting, I used to sit in the back, I was one of those. And we sat down, and they gave us the bulletin. And on the title of the bulletin, it said, I love you so much, I have to let you go.
I think it was, I love you so much, I'm willing to let you go.
There it is. And I looked at her, she looked at me. She's like, did you know? Like, I had no idea. I was probably more shocked than she was, but those were word for word the words that I had said when I ended it, which is the reason that we were so shocked, and that's really what makes it a miracle. That God was specifically telling us, I'm in this. Some people come to faith, they come to church, they visit, and they hear a good sermon, and they walk the aisle and they get saved. Some of us are a little hard-headed based on our prior experience or worldview, and we have to have that Saul to Paul moment where God literally has to hit us over the head and say, it's me. And that I knew is what it would take for her, but I couldn't do that. God had to do that. And he did it in an amazing way, that even as I share this testimony now, and as I've shared it with other people in other churches in the past, it's always so shocking to them to see how much God loves all of us, that he'll do this for one person. Because it wasn't about me, he was trying to get her. And it wasn't even about me trying to manipulate God into making this relationship work. I was simply trying to be obedient when I said, I have to go. I had no ulterior motive, like if I do this, maybe God will do that. I didn't think like that. I simply knew just be obedient. And because of that, she came, and I think 2 or 3 weeks later.
So when I came to the first service, I was surprised by the title. But I dismissed it as a coincidence. It wasn't really until it was in the midst of service and I was listening to Pastor Hannah, who is charismatic and all of that. And I think I was able to just initially say, here are these people that are just drawn to this charismatic person. But in the midst of service and listening to the message and thinking about how it applied to us in our lives, I just broke down into tears. I haven't recounted this in a while, getting emotional. I just broke into tears, and I didn't really even know, couldn't explain the emotions that I was having. So he hugged me, and I cried, and I was just like, I don't know why I'm crying, kind of like right now. And I don't know that we said a whole lot on the ride home from there, but I was just like, I guess I can't explain this. And I know I've been connected to you for so long, I don't really want to let it go yet. So I continued to go to church, and I think it was maybe I thought it was a few months later, in 2006, we were at King High School, and I don't actually even remember that sermon specifically. I just remember feeling confident that I was being pulled by God, and that my whole paradigm and worldview was changing. And so I got up, and it was kind of an out-of-body experience. I don't even know what was happening. I went up and I accepted Jesus Christ. And from that moment forward, I just felt a lightness in our relationship and what I was doing, and a peace that I hadn't experienced before. So it was quick. It was a quick conversion, but I continued to battle with doubt. But I had Alex to help me, and now I feel very strong in my conviction for God, and I can look back on our life together and see all of the ways that he was orchestrating things in our life. So
yeah, and I do remember walking back to the car after that first Sunday, and we didn't say much, mostly because I didn't know what to say. I was so shocked. And when we did try to talk, I said, you know what, in my head, this is not an I told you so moment. This is God's moment. And I think the only thing I did say to her is, you don't have to say anything. Just let the moment be what it is. And when she did, whatever it was, a few weeks later, go up and walk that aisle that we've all walked to get saved, that's when I broke down. And I remember my friend was sitting with us, and I'm on his shoulder crying. And I think what you got to know also, when we met, yes, I knew God at an early age, but when she met me, I was a alcoholic drug dealer with anger issues. Far from any kind of a man of God, far from the example that I needed to be. And she knew that the only way that I could change from who I was to who I am had to be God. If you knew me in the past, you would know there's no possible way to explain it other than God. And even as people will hear this testimony, they have to know you can't trace this to anything or anyone but God.
So, people that know Alex now, think of him as a walking Bible. Someone who's super dedicated to his family and his kids, which he is. He's an amazing husband and father. And he is incredibly dedicated to his pursuit of his relationship with God. And also just making sure that other people have that connection as well. Now, what people don't often or are surprised to know is that when I met Alex, he drank a lot. We were young college students and, we lived the stereotypical college life. And at the time, it was just, us having fun. But when I look back on it, I actually am surprised with how much I tolerated in terms of, dealing drugs, and there were some pretty explosive fights, never physical, but it was tumultuous and it was chaotic. And I look back and I think to myself, why did I stay in a relationship like that? And I honestly have no explanation why, other than I felt pulled to him. I knew he had something in him. When we were together one-on-one and sober, it was, we had amazing conversations, and he's incredibly smart. But I'm not sure that I ever expected him to become a pastor, for sure. I think I would have been scared away. I think if you told me, here's this man in 10, 16 years, you're going to be a pastor's wife, I would have been like,
She's told me she never wanted to be a pastor's wife as well.
So I'm surprised by where we are, but also thankful that we're at this place. I think if God had showed us too much of where we were going, we might have been a little bit hesitant to follow. So I think he only shows you so far ahead to kind of get you to the full picture of where you're going.
Now that she knows God, I have a responsibility as the man to lead her in the right way. I went through a financial situation, or at least it began at that time, where it was like every day was worse than the one before. And I would wake up and I'd say, okay, God, I know you love me. I know you're not going to let it get worse than that. And then invariably it would get worse than that. And it got to a point where I knew that if I wasn't completely in the will of God, I could never really hope to get out, because God is a God of principle. So I said at a point after we had been served eviction papers that we can't go to another place, if we're lucky to find another place, in this same improper relationship. So either we have to get married now, or we have to be apart, live apart. And financially, that would have been difficult, but at that point, it was more important to be obedient, regardless of difficulties. And I know that women always think about their wedding day, how they want it to be, rightfully so. They deserve that dream wedding. And financially, I couldn't give that to her. And I wasn't even spiritually in line to be able to enter into that at that time. So I said that we should get married, go to the courthouse, get the papers, and be in proper relationship with God. And we did that. We actually got married on my birthday. But I knew in the back of my mind, and what I've always prayed to God is, God, He's told me to do some difficult things. He's told me to have some difficult conversations. And my only prayer has always been, God, just back me up. Don't have me looking stupid saying, God said, and then there's no evidence that you said it or that you were ordaining it. And He's always backed me up, including back to the situation that we just talked about. So I was making some promises that I wasn't sure how I was going to keep, but I assured her that she would still have her wedding day, that we would still have our wedding day, that it would be perfect, that it would be beautiful. And a year later, God had finally delivered me from the financial hell that I was going through. I had got a new job, and that summer, 2008, when we had our wedding, it was a perfect day. I mean, we couldn't have asked. It was really hot. I almost died in my tuxedo, but it was literally a perfect day. I had scripted the ceremony, thankfully, to be only 15 minutes long. And the sun was shining, everybody was there. It was a beautiful outdoor wedding back in Virginia. And I'll tell this part, it's kind of funny, but it's true, that I remember thinking in the back of my head, hey God, you told me you'd back me up on this perfect wedding day. She loves it, here it is, it's awesome. And then clouds started to approach this outdoor wedding. And
things were rolling over.
Yeah, I don't claim to be Moses or anything like that, but I did pray and look at the sky and say, God, this is what we talked about. I need you to make these clouds go away. And honest to God, the clouds pushed back. Once again, I'm not Moses.
It actually brought in a much needed breeze.
Much needed
for our
cool
guests.
down.
Yeah.
But this is the point of the story, that your obedience is first and foremost the priority that God wants you to have. And once you demonstrate your obedience, He'll back you up. A lot of times we want God to co-sign our plan instead of first finding out what His plan is and submitting to that, even when, and especially when it's difficult. So we had that perfect wedding, and the rest is history. We often say that God honors our sacrifice, but the truth of the matter is that if we're obedient up front, we often don't have to make a sacrifice later. Obedience usually makes sacrifice unnecessary. So it's true that God honors our sacrifice, but He blesses our obedience.